Thinking back, I don't think I saw it coming. My marriage to Lisa, it started out like a dream, or at least I thought it did. We met back in college, one of those crisp fall afternoons when the campus was alive with students rushing to class and the smell of coffee lingering in the air. I was in my junior year, deep into construction management, learning to calculate load weights and manage timelines. Lisa? She was this bright-eyed sophomore, always lugging around a leather portfolio stuffed with her graphic design sketches. She had this magnetic energy about her, like the kind of person who walks into a room, and everyone just naturally gravitates toward her. The first time I saw her, she was laughing, this big, uninhibited laugh that made you stop and notice. She was sitting on the library steps with her friends, her auburn hair catching the sunlight just right. I don't know what it was, but in that moment, I just knew I had to talk to her. Turns out, she was even more incredible up close. She had this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the world when she looked at you. And man, when she looked at me, it felt like I was 10 feet tall. We started dating a few weeks later, and for 2 years, it was like we were in our own little bubble. Weekend road trips, late-night study sessions, sitting on the couch dreaming about our future, we were building something together. I thought I had found my forever. When we got married, it wasn't anything fancy. Just a simple ceremony in the little white church Lisa used to attend as a kid. There were only about 40 people there, mostly family and a few close friends. My mom baked the cake, and Lisa's cousin played the piano for the ceremony. We couldn't afford a big reception, but we didn't care. That night, we danced under the stars in my uncle's backyard, with string lights swaying in the breeze. I'll never forget how Lisa looked that night, barefoot in her wedding dress, her cheeks flushed from the champagne. I thought, this is it. This is what happiness feels like. We moved into a modest house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood, a little 2-bedroom with a creaky porch swing and a yard that needed a lot of work. I was fresh out of college with a steady job in construction management. Lisa had just started freelancing as a graphic designer. We weren't swimming in money, but we made it work. I'd leave little notes for her on the fridge in the mornings, and she'd surprise me with homemade dinners when she had time between projects. It felt good. It felt solid. But as time went on, I started to notice things. Lisa always had big dreams. She'd talk about living in a penthouse overlooking the city, hosting dinner parties with crystal glasses and fine china. She wanted designer handbags, luxury vacations, the kind of life you see in movies. I admired her ambition, I really did. I'd tell her, "We'll get there, Lisa. One day, we'll have it all." And at first, that seemed to be enough. But somewhere along the line, her dreams started feeling more like expectations. "Why are you so okay with living like this?" she'd say, gesturing around our little house. "Don't you want more?" Those words stung, but I brushed them off. I told myself she was just frustrated, that she wanted the best for us. But in hindsight, those were the first cracks in the foundation of our marriage. The changes were subtle at first. Lisa started spending more time on her phone, always scrolling or typing. She'd laugh at messages and then quickly lock her screen when I walked into the room. "Who are you talking to?" I'd ask, keeping my tone casual. "Just some friends," she'd say, barely looking up. I didn't press her. I trusted her. At least, I wanted to. She also started going out more, networking events, she called them. She'd come home late, the faint scent of expensive perfume lingering in the air. Sometimes, there was another smell too, cologne. I'd feel a knot tighten in my stomach, but I pushed it down. She's just trying to grow her business, I told myself. She's doing this for us. Then there were her new friends. Names like Elliot, Vanessa, and Brandon started cropping up in conversations. She'd tell me stories about their glamorous lives, how they'd throw parties in downtown lofts or fly off to ski resorts for the weekend. "They're just so inspiring," she'd say, her eyes lighting up. But every time she talked about them, I couldn't help but feel out of place. Like I didn't belong in her new world. Lisa started changing too. The casual jeans and cozy sweaters she used to love were replaced with sleek designer outfits. She started wearing heels every day, even when she didn't need to. She got her hair done more often, her nails were always perfectly manicured, and she bought a necklace that cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. "It's an investment in myself," she said when I questioned it. "People take you seriously when you look the part." I told myself it was just a phase. People grow, right? They change. And I wanted to support her dreams. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The cracks in our marriage didn't happen all at once. They spread slowly, like hairline fractures in concrete, growing wider with every unspoken argument and every moment of doubt. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was enough for her. I'd replay her words in my head, "Why are you so content with mediocrity?" And they'd echo like a taunt. I wanted to fix things, to be the husband she needed. But how do you fix something when you don't even know what's broken? It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything came crashing down. Funny, isn't it? How your whole world can fall apart on a day as ordinary as a Tuesday. I'd gotten off work early, a rare treat, and decided to surprise Lisa with lunch. I figured we could eat together, maybe talk. She'd been so distant lately, and I thought this might be a way to close the gap. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was there. The house was quiet, eerily so. Usually, the TV was on or music was playing, but that day, there was nothing. I walked in, balancing a bag of takeout in one hand and my keys in the other, and called out, "Lisa? I'm home." No answer. I checked the living room, the bedroom, the back porch. Nothing. Then, as I passed through the kitchen, I noticed her laptop sitting open on the counter. The screen was still on, a faint glow in the dim room. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the gnawing feeling in my gut that something wasn't right. Maybe it was curiosity. Whatever it was, I found myself walking over and looking at the screen. Her password was still the same as it had always been, my birthday. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the keyboard. I felt a wave of guilt, like I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But then I thought about the late nights, the perfume, the arguments. Something inside me whispered, "You need to know." So I typed in the password and hit enter. What I saw made my blood run cold. Her email was open, and there, in plain sight, was a string of messages from someone named Elliot. At first, I thought maybe he was a client. The subject lines were vague: "This weekend, can't wait to see you, miss you already." But as I clicked through the emails, the truth hit me like a freight train. These weren't business messages. These were love letters. One email read, "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. When can we run away together?" Another said, "Don't worry about him. He's so predictable. I'll make sure everything works out." And then there were the photos: Lisa on a yacht, Lisa at a fancy restaurant, Lisa smiling in a dress I'd never seen before. In one picture, she was leaning into Elliot, her head resting on his shoulder. They looked so happy. Like they didn't have a care in the world. My hands shook as I scrolled through the messages, my vision blurring with anger and humiliation. It wasn't just an affair. It was a full-blown betrayal. They'd been mocking me, planning a future together while I was working overtime to build a life for us. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the screen, replaying every moment in my head. The late-night, networking events, the secretive texts, the fancy outfits. It all made sense now. The truth had been right in front of me, and I'd been too blind to see it. When Lisa came home that evening, I was still sitting in the living room, her laptop open on the coffee table. The takeout was untouched, the smell of cold fries hanging in the air. I heard the jingle of her keys, the sound of the door opening and closing, and then her voice, cheerful and unsuspecting. "Hey! You're home early," she called out. She walked into the living room, a smile on her face, but it froze the moment she saw me. Her eyes flicked to the laptop, and I saw the panic flash across her face. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I picked up the laptop and turned it toward her, showing her the screen. "Who's Elliot?" I asked, my voice steady, though I could feel the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. Her face went pale. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it. But then her expression hardened. "You had no right to go through my emails," she snapped. "Don't you dare try to turn this around on me," I said, standing up. My voice was rising now, the rage spilling over. "You've been cheating on me. Lying to me. I've seen the messages, Lisa. I've seen the pictures." She opened her mouth, then closed it again, like she couldn't decide whether to defend herself or attack me. Finally, she crossed her arms and said, "Fine. You want the truth?" "Yes, I've been seeing Elliot. He gives me what you can't. Do you even know what it's like to live with someone so ordinary?" Her words were like a dagger to the chest. "Ordinary?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "I've given you everything, Lisa. I've worked my ass off to build a life for us, and this is how you repay me?" She rolled her eyes, her face twisting with disdain. "Don't be so dramatic," she said, brushing past me like I was a piece of furniture. "You'll get over it." In that moment, something inside me snapped. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the Lisa I thought I knew. She was a stranger who had shattered my heart without a second thought. I've expanded on the emotional tension, physical details, and dialogue to deepen the reader's connection with the protagonist and the story. The days after that confrontation blurred together into one long, painful haze. Lisa and I still lived under the same roof, but it was like sharing a house with a ghost. She barely looked at me, let alone spoke to me. Most nights, she'd leave without saying where she was going. Sometimes she didn't even come home until the early hours of the morning. I stopped asking where she'd been, the answer didn't matter anymore. Everywhere I turned, I was reminded of her betrayal. Her designer heels lined up neatly by the door, the faint scent of her perfume clinging to the couch, the wedding photos still hanging on the walls, it all felt like a mockery. At night, I'd lie awake in our bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every argument, every late night, every sign I had ignored. Her words echoed in my mind, "You'll get over it." Ordinary. I didn't feel ordinary. I felt broken. At first, I tried to keep it together. I went to work, poured myself into projects, and pretended nothing was wrong. But the cracks were showing. My coworkers started giving me those concerned looks, the kind where they want to ask what's wrong but don't know how. One day, my foreman, a gruff guy named Mike, pulled me aside during lunch. "You look like hell, man," he said, handing me a coffee. "What's going on?" I stared at the steam rising from the cup, my throat tightening. "It's Lisa," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. She's been seeing someone else." Mike didn't say anything for a moment, just nodded like he understood. "That's tough," he said. "But listen, you can't let it eat you alive. You've got to deal with it, head on. Otherwise, it'll tear you apart." I nodded, but his words didn't make me feel any better. How do you deal with something like this? How do you face the person who betrayed you and keep living in the same house? It wasn't just the silence that hurt. It was the way Lisa carried on like nothing had happened. She still went to her networking events, still dressed up in her sleek designer outfits, still laughed on the phone with people I didn't know. Meanwhile, I felt like I was drowning, clinging to the remains of a life that no longer made sense. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of her social media posts, pictures of fancy dinners, rooftop parties, her smiling in dresses I hadn't seen before. She'd stopped tagging me in anything months ago. Instead, her captions were full of vague inspiration, living my best life or chasing dreams. It was like I didn't exist in her world anymore. I started drinking more than I should have. Not enough to get drunk, but enough to dull the ache. Late at night, I'd sit on the back porch with a beer in my hand, staring out at the dark yard. The porch light flickered sometimes, one more thing I hadn't gotten around to fixing. I'd think about our wedding day, the way she looked at me when she said, "I do." Had it all been a lie? Or had she meant it, once upon a time? Months passed, and the distance between us grew wider. Then one day, I heard through the grapevine that Elliot's business had gone under. Apparently, he'd been caught up in some shady deals, and his whole empire collapsed like a house of cards. Word traveled fast in Lisa's social circles, and soon her glamorous posts on social media stopped. The designer outfits, the fancy dinners, the trips to who knows where, all of it vanished. I thought that might be the end of it, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. One rainy evening, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, there she was, Lisa, standing on the porch, drenched from the downpour. Her makeup was smudged, her hair a mess, and she looked small. Not the confident, glamorous woman I'd once admired, but someone lost and desperate. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice shaking. "I was stupid and selfish, but I love you. Can we try again? Please?" For a moment, I just stared at her, not knowing what to say. She looked so different from the woman who had stood in this same house months ago, telling me I was too ordinary for her. But her tears didn't move me. I could see it in her eyes. This wasn't about love. This was about regret. She'd lost everything, and now she wanted back what she had thrown away. "I can't, Lisa," I said finally, my voice steady but tired. "You didn't just hurt me. You destroyed everything we had. There's no going back from that." She begged, pleaded, promised that things would be different. But I'd spent too many sleepless nights and cried too many tears to let her back into my life. I'd been holding on to the idea of us for so long, but in that moment, I knew it was time to let go. The divorce was ugly, as these things often are. We sold the house, divided up the furniture, and went our separate ways. I packed my life into boxes and moved to a new city, far from the memories that haunted me. It wasn't easy starting over, but it was necessary. I focused on rebuilding my life, one piece at a time. I took up running, joined a local woodworking class, and even started seeing a therapist. Slowly, the weight on my chest began to lift. I learned to laugh again, to trust again, to hope again. And then, one day, I met Emma. She wasn't flashy or glamorous like Lisa had been. She was kind and genuine, with a laugh that felt like home. She didn't want penthouses or luxury cars, she just wanted a life built on love, trust, and partnership. Being with her reminded me of what love was supposed to feel like, simple, honest, and real. Looking back, I realize Lisa's betrayal, as painful as it was, taught me some of the most important lessons of my life. I learned the value of self-respect, the importance of setting boundaries, and the strength it takes to walk away from something that's no longer good for you. So, if you're out there, stuck in the middle of heartbreak, let me tell you this, it gets better. You'll find your way again. You'll heal. And when you do, you'll realize that happiness doesn't come from someone else, it comes from within.